Welcome back to XRP On Moon, the channel where we break down the biggest, boldest, and sometimes unbelievable developments in the world of XRP. And today's topic might just be one of the most explosive yet. Because what if I told you that artificial intelligence, yes, advanced AI linked to the vision of Elon Musk, has just made a prediction about XRP that is sending shockwaves through the crypto space? And even more importantly, what if this prediction suggests that holding 2,500 XRP right now could be the difference between staying average and stepping into a completely different financial reality? Now, before you brush this off as just another headline designed to grab your attention, let's slow things down for a moment. Because what's happening right now is not random hype. It's part of a much bigger narrative that has been quietly building behind the scenes. AI is no longer just a futuristic concept. It's actively analyzing markets, detecting patterns, and making projections at a level that no human analyst can match. And when AI starts pointing toward a specific digital asset like XRP, people start paying very, very close attention. Here's where things start to get interesting. Over the past few years, XRP has been at the center of one of the most controversial and talked about stories in crypto. Regulatory battles, institutional interest, global payment integrations. This isn't just another coin trying to pump. XRP has always been positioned as something bigger, something designed to integrate with the financial system rather than fight against it. And now, with AI stepping into the picture, the narrative is evolving once again. According to emerging discussions and data interpretations, advanced AI models have been analyzing XRP's historical price behavior, its correlation with global liquidity cycles, and its potential role in cross-border payments. What they're suggesting isn't just a small price increase. It's a scenario where XRP could experience a massive revaluation event under the right conditions. And this is exactly why you're seeing headlines pushing the idea of accumulating a specific amount, like 2,500 XRP, before it's too late. But why that number? Why not 100 XRP or 10,000? This is where psychology meets strategy. The idea of 2,500 XRP isn't random. It sits in that middle ground where it's still achievable for many people, but also large enough to potentially create life-changing outcomes if those high-end predictions ever play out. It creates urgency, it creates focus, and most importantly, it creates a question in your mind. What if this is real? Now let's be clear. AI doesn't predict the future with certainty. What it does is analyze probabilities based on massive data sets. It sees patterns that humans often miss. It connects dots across markets, macroeconomics, and technological adoption. And right now, those dots seem to be forming a very specific picture around XRP, a picture that suggests the current price might not fully reflect its long-term utility or positioning in the evolving financial system. At the same time, we need to understand the environment we're in. Global finance is shifting. Digital currencies are no longer being ignored. They're being studied, tested, and in some cases, quietly adopted. Central banks are exploring CBDCs. Payment giants are experimenting with blockchain rails. And in the middle of all this, XRP continues to be part of conversations that most retail investors never even hear about. So when you combine all of this, the AI analysis, the institutional undercurrent, the historical resilience of XRP, you start to see why this topic is exploding right now. It's not just about price, it's about positioning. It's about being early versus being late. And most importantly, it's about understanding the difference between noise and signal. Because let's be honest, crypto is full of noise. Every day there's a new prediction, a new must-buy coin, a new promise of massive gains. But every once in a while, something cuts through that noise. Something that makes people stop, think, and reconsider their strategy. And right now, this AI-driven XRP narrative is doing exactly that. The real question isn't whether XRP will hit a specific number tomorrow or next week. The real question is whether the foundation being built today could support something much bigger in the future. And if that's the case, then the idea of accumulating a certain amount while prices are still relatively low starts to look less like speculation and more like preparation. But here's the twist, and this is where things get even more intense. Not everyone agrees with this AI outlook. In fact, some analysts believe these predictions are being misunderstood, exaggerated, or even intentionally amplified to create hype. So who's right? Is this a genuine signal from advanced intelligence, or just another wave of market excitement? The moment this AI-driven XRP narrative started spreading, the reaction across the crypto space was instant and divided. On one side, you had believers who see XRP as an undervalued asset sitting on the edge of a massive breakout cycle. On the other side, skeptics immediately dismissed it as another overhyped prediction designed to trigger emotional buying. But what makes this situation different is not the prediction itself, it's the source and the way the data is being interpreted. To understand why people are taking this seriously, you have to look at how modern AI systems analyze financial assets. These models don't rely on emotion, rumors, or social media hype. Instead, they process decades of price history, trading volume behavior, macroeconomic cycles, liquidity flows, and even investor sentiment patterns across global markets. When XRP data is fed into such systems, the output isn't a guarantee, but a probability map, showing what could happen under specific conditions. And in those projections, XRP begins to stand out in a very unusual way. Unlike many cryptocurrencies that rise and fall purely on hype cycles, XRP shows repeated periods of consolidation followed by sharp volatility expansions. AI systems interpret this as a compressed value structure, meaning the asset may be building pressure over time rather than losing relevance. This is one of the key reasons why discussions around long-term accumulation, like holding a few thousand XRP, have started gaining traction. But here is where things get even more interesting. The idea of Elon Musk being indirectly connected to AI predictions adds an entirely different psychological layer to the story. Musk has always been associated with disruptive technologies. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and of course AI development discussions through various platforms. Even when he is not directly involved, his name alone creates a sense of technological inevitability in the public mind. So when people hear AI prediction and Elon Musk in the same sentence, the emotional impact multiplies instantly. However, there is no verified system that allows any AI to directly predict XRP's exact future price with certainty. What is actually happening is more subtle and arguably more important. AI models are being used to simulate future scenarios based on different adoption rates, regulatory outcomes, and global financial shifts. In some of those simulations, XRP performs exceptionally well under conditions where cross-border payment systems shift toward blockchain efficiency. In others, it remains stable but less explosive. The difference lies entirely in adoption speed. This is why the number 2,500 XRP has become symbolic in online discussions. It's not a technical requirement, it's a psychological benchmark. For many retail investors, owning that amount represents meaningful exposure without overcommitting. If XRP were ever to experience a major valuation shift due to institutional adoption or global payment integration, holding a mid-sized position could feel significantly more impactful than holding a small speculative amount. Still, the market reality cannot be ignored. XRP has already gone through multiple cycles of extreme optimism, followed by long periods of consolidation. Investors who have been in the space for years have seen predictions come and go. Some turned out to be wildly exaggerated, while others underestimated how long real adoption takes. This history is exactly why current AI-based projections are both exciting and controversial at the same time. What's also important to understand is that markets don't move just because of predictions. They move because of liquidity, demand, and real-world usage. XRP's long-term value proposition has always been tied to its ability to facilitate fast, low-cost international transactions. If that utility continues to expand, then any AI model analyzing pure fundamentals will naturally generate more optimistic long-term scenarios. But if adoption slows or regulatory barriers increase, those same models adjust downward just as quickly. So what you are really seeing here is not a guaranteed forecast, but a clash of narratives. One narrative believes XRP is quietly positioning itself for a major financial role in the future global payment system. The other believes it is simply another digital asset caught in cycles of speculation and market emotion. And between these two perspectives lies the real tension driving all the excitement. Because whether people agree or disagree, everyone is asking the same underlying question. Is XRP currently being undervalued by the market relative to its long-term potential? That question doesn't have an easy answer, but as more AI-driven analysis enters the conversation, and as global financial systems continue evolving, the debate is only becoming louder and far more serious than it appears on the surface. The deeper this AI-driven XRP narrative goes, the more it starts to shift from a simple prediction into something that feels like a larger financial storyline unfolding in real time. Because at this stage, people are no longer just asking, will XRP go up? They are now asking something far more serious. What kind of role will XRP play if the global financial system actually starts changing in the way AI models are suggesting? To understand this, you have to step back from price charts for a moment and look at the bigger picture AI systems are analyzing. These models don't just look at XRP in isolation. They compare it against the entire digital asset ecosystem, traditional banking infrastructure, and even global settlement systems that move trillions of dollars every single day. And when XRP is placed inside that framework, something interesting begins to appear. It is not competing like a typical cryptocurrency. It is being evaluated like a potential financial rail. This is where the AI projections become more intense. Instead of focusing on short-term price swings, the models start simulating long-term adoption scenarios. For example, what happens if even a small percentage of global cross-border payments shift toward blockchain-based settlement? What happens if financial institutions begin prioritizing speed and cost efficiency over legacy systems? In these simulations, XRP often emerges as a strong candidate due to its design focus on fast and low-cost transfers. Now, this is also where the Elon Musk AI narrative becomes more symbolic than literal. There is no confirmed system where Musk's technology is directly forecasting XRP. However, Musk's association with artificial intelligence and future-oriented infrastructure creates a psychological bridge in public perception. When people hear AI-driven predictions in a world influenced by Musk's innovations, they automatically assume a level of technological authority behind it. This is not about facts, it's about influence, mindset, and how narratives spread in digital markets. And once a narrative gains momentum, it starts feeding itself. Social media discussions amplify it. Influencers break it down. Communities begin calculating hypothetical scenarios. Suddenly, XRP is not just a token being traded, it becomes a what-if asset. What if adoption increases? What if regulations become clearer? What if financial systems integrate blockchain at scale? Each what-if adds another layer of curiosity and emotional engagement. This is exactly why accumulation discussions, like the idea of holding 2,500 XRP, continue circulating. In these conversations, the focus is not daily price action. Instead, it's about positioning. The belief is simple. If any of these long-term scenarios play out even partially, those who held a meaningful amount early could experience a very different outcome compared to those who ignored the asset entirely. Whether or not that belief is correct is still up for debate, but the mindset behind it is becoming increasingly common. At the same time, AI models also introduce an important counterbalance that often gets ignored in hype-driven discussions. They don't only simulate bullish outcomes, they also simulate delays, regulatory friction, slow adoption rates, and competing technologies. In many of those scenarios, XRP's growth is steady but not explosive. It becomes a long-term utility asset rather than a rapid wealth-generating vehicle. This duality is what makes AI-based forecasting so complex. It doesn't give one answer, it gives a range of possibilities. And within that range, the uncertainty itself becomes powerful, because uncertainty forces investors to think in probabilities rather than certainties. Instead of asking, will XRP hit a specific price, the question slowly transforms into, what is the probability that XRP becomes widely used in global settlement systems over the next decade? That shift in thinking is exactly what separates emotional trading from strategic positioning. Meanwhile, market sentiment continues to play its own role in shaping perception. Every new partnership announcement, every regulatory update, and every macroeconomic shift gets absorbed into this larger AI-driven narrative. Even when price movement is minimal, attention around XRP remains unusually high compared to many other assets in the same category. This attention itself becomes part of the feedback loop that AI systems analyze. So what we are witnessing is not just a prediction, it is a convergence of data analysis, market psychology, and technological storytelling. XRP sits right in the center of that convergence, constantly being reevaluated by both machines and humans trying to interpret what comes next. And as this cycle continues, one thing becomes clear. The conversation is no longer just about whether XRP will rise or fall. It is about whether the world is slowly moving toward a financial structure where assets like XRP could play a foundational role, or whether this entire narrative is simply another chapter in crypto's long history of speculation and expectation. The focus gradually shifts away from isolated predictions and moves towards something much larger, system-level transformation. Because at this point, the discussion around XRP is no longer just about price speculation or even AI forecasting. It is about whether the global financial architecture itself is entering a phase where assets like XRP could become functionally relevant in ways most retail investors are not fully prepared for. AI models that analyze macro financial systems don't treat cryptocurrencies as investments in the traditional sense. Instead, they evaluate them as potential infrastructure layers. In that framework, XRP is repeatedly tested against scenarios involving cross-border liquidity movement, banking settlement efficiency, and real-time value transfer systems. What stands out in these simulations is not guaranteed success, but structural compatibility. XRP is consistently positioned as a tool optimized for speed and transaction efficiency, two factors that become critical in a globally interconnected economy. This is where the idea of accumulation, such as holding a fixed amount like 2,500 XRP, gains psychological weight among retail communities. It is not based on technical confirmation or institutional endorsement. Instead, it comes from a belief in asymmetric potential, where the downside is limited to current market exposure, but the upside, if adoption expands significantly, could be disproportionately large. This mindset is not unique to XRP. It appears in many emerging technologies before they reach mainstream validation. However, what makes this situation more complex is the way AI-driven narratives interact with human behavior. Once an AI-generated projection enters public discussion, it is no longer just data. It becomes storytelling fuel. People begin interpreting probabilities as expectations. Scenarios become predictions, and predictions slowly transform into perceived inevitabilities. This psychological transition is where most hype cycles in financial markets tend to accelerate. The mention of Elon Musk in this broader narrative acts as a catalyst rather than a source. Even without direct involvement, Musk's public identity as a futurist in technology and artificial intelligence creates an association effect. When investors hear AI prediction in a world influenced by Musk-related innovation, the message gains perceived credibility. This does not mean the prediction is more accurate. It simply means it feels more significant. And in markets driven heavily by sentiment, perception can sometimes move faster than reality. Meanwhile, AI systems themselves remain neutral in function. They do not believe in XRP or any other asset. They calculate outcomes based on variables like adoption rate, liquidity flow, regulatory clarity, and technological integration. In bullish scenarios where blockchain-based settlement systems expand globally, XRP naturally benefits due to its design focus. In conservative scenarios, where traditional financial systems remain dominant, its growth remains limited or gradual. This range of outcomes is exactly what makes AI analysis both powerful and misunderstood. Another important layer in this discussion is institutional behavior. While retail attention often focuses on price predictions, institutional players focus on utility, compliance, and integration potential. If XRP or similar assets ever become embedded in regulated financial infrastructure, the impact would not resemble typical crypto bull runs. Instead, it would likely manifest as a slower, structural repricing over time, driven by actual usage rather than speculation alone. This distinction is crucial because it challenges the idea of sudden explosive moves being the only path to success. AI models that incorporate real-world financial adoption often show that transformative assets do not always move in straight vertical lines. They evolve through phases: accumulation, testing, integration, and scaling. XRP, in many simulations, appears to still be navigating these early to mid phases depending on jurisdiction and adoption speed. At the same time, skepticism remains a strong counterforce. Critics argue that most AI-driven price narratives are being misunderstood or exaggerated by online communities. They emphasize that without clear, widespread institutional adoption, no algorithm can reliably forecast exponential price outcomes. According to this perspective, XRP remains a highly functional but still speculative asset, influenced more by sentiment cycles than by guaranteed structural demand. And this tension between optimism and skepticism is exactly what keeps the narrative alive. If everything were certain, there would be no discussion. If everything were impossible, there would be no interest. Instead, XRP exists in a space where both possibilities feel technically plausible, depending on which assumptions you choose to believe. As AI continues to refine its models and global financial systems slowly evolve, this debate is likely to intensify rather than disappear. Each new data point, whether it is regulatory development, institutional experimentation, or macroeconomic shift, feeds back into the system, reshaping projections and reinforcing the idea that XRP is part of a much larger unfolding story. But even with all these layers of analysis, one fundamental question remains unresolved. Are we witnessing the early positioning of a future financial infrastructure asset, or are we simply watching another cycle of technologically amplified speculation take shape in real time? Everything comes down to one central tension: interpretation versus reality. Because whether XRP becomes a globally integrated financial rail or remains a highly debated digital asset, the outcome will not be decided by AI predictions alone, and certainly not by viral headlines. It will be determined by real-world adoption, institutional behavior, regulatory clarity, and how effectively blockchain-based systems actually solve problems at scale. AI models, no matter how advanced, can only work with the data they are given. They can simulate outcomes based on assumptions like increased adoption of blockchain settlement systems, reduced reliance on legacy banking infrastructure, or expansion of real-time cross-border payments. In those simulations, XRP often appears in strong positions due to its design efficiency and transaction speed. but simulations are not guarantees. They are structured possibilities, not confirmed futures. This is where many retail narratives tend to diverge from analytical reality. The idea of buying a specific amount like 2,500 XRP and expecting a predetermined outcome is emotionally compelling but financially simplistic. Markets do not reward fixed thinking, they reward adaptability. If XRP grows significantly in utility, it will likely do so through gradual integration into systems that most retail investors never directly see in real time. And if it does not achieve that level of adoption, then no prediction, AI-driven or otherwise, can override market fundamentals. The association of Elon Musk with AI-based predictions in this context should also be understood carefully. Musk represents innovation, disruption, and future-facing technology in the public imagination. But imagination is not execution. While AI development is undeniably shaping the way markets are analyzed, there is no verified mechanism where Musk-linked systems are issuing direct XRP price forecasts. What exists instead is a blending of technological influence and social interpretation, where names and ideas merge into powerful narratives that spread quickly online, and that is exactly what makes this entire conversation so impactful. It is not just about XRP, it is about how modern financial storytelling works. Information no longer travels in isolation. It moves through communities, algorithms, and emotional reinforcement loops. A single idea can evolve from a technical observation into a full-scale market narrative within hours. And once that happens, separating data from perception becomes increasingly difficult for the average observer. From a more grounded perspective, XRP's real-world value proposition continues to depend on one core factor: utility. Whether it is used for institutional settlements, cross-border transactions, or liquidity bridging, its long-term relevance will be tied to actual usage, not speculative projections. If adoption expands, value can follow. If adoption stalls, attention alone cannot sustain long-term growth. This is a principle that applies across all financial assets, regardless of technological narrative. At the same time, the presence of AI in financial analysis is not something to dismiss. It is reshaping how trends are identified, how risk is evaluated, and how scenarios are modeled. But AI is a tool for understanding probabilities, not a device for delivering certainties. When used correctly, it can highlight possibilities that humans might overlook. When misunderstood, it can create overconfidence in outcomes that are far from guaranteed. So where does that leave XRP in the middle of all this? It leaves it in a position of ongoing uncertainty, but also ongoing relevance. XRP remains one of the few digital assets that consistently appears in discussions about real financial infrastructure rather than just retail speculation. That alone keeps it in focus, even during quieter market phases. But focus is not the same as confirmation, and attention is not the same as adoption. The truth is that the future being discussed here is still unfolding. None of the scenarios presented, whether extremely bullish or cautiously conservative, are finalized. They are branches of possibility, each dependent on decisions made by institutions, regulators, developers, and market participants over time. AI can map those branches, but it cannot choose which one becomes reality. And this is where the final takeaway becomes clear. The real question is not whether an AI predicts XRP will rise, or whether viral narratives suggest a specific price target. The real question is whether the underlying systems that XRP is designed to support will expand enough to create sustained real-world demand. Everything else, predictions, headlines, hype cycles, and even fears, sits on top of that foundation. This content is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered financial, investment, or trading advice. Cryptocurrency markets are highly volatile and risky. Always conduct your own research and consult with a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decisions.